Quiet your conscience. Gather your will. Find the strength to go on and make it up that hill. Pushing through the doors in the wide main hallway of the hospital, most of us were ready to go. Gage had wanted to see what she could do to get Grumpy back in the fight, but her overtaxing of his power supply earlier didn't leave her hopeful. Harmony had promised to help her out with it, but I didn't know how much she could do when she still had a lot of work to do on the Marauder. Preetius floated the old stealth buck contraption that Kiwi had made between us, while also levitating a pair of combat pistols he'd equipped with. Ficha had opted to stick with his usual crossbow, and I knew that somehow, he was able to recover from his grievous wounds, but if I were him, I would have wanted something a little more modern, to make sure I didn't have to find out somehow I was not able to come back from a hit. Lastly, Shadow trotted along with heavy hoof steps. His sleek power armor looked out of the box new compared to Pallet's Gauss rifles that sat on his sides. Harmony had insisted that he use them, as they would have most likely have the most ability to punch through Ranger power armor out of anything smaller than an anti-machine rifle. With a crackle, a voice came through the speaker in my ear. Radio check. Calling channel 34. Oilcan's voice came through clear. Storm, is this your channel? I lifted my hoof to my side of my head and hoofed the headset microphone down to my muzzle before pressing the talk button on the other side of the speaker. Yes, this is our channel. Good to know. His voice came back across with a relieved sigh. All the Pegasi are up here and ready to go. As he spoke, I looked over to Shadow, who, even with his helmet on, I could see was a bit frustrated at that. If you need any air support, I'm on channel 23 with the others. Got it. I nodded and replied back. Good luck out there. You too. He replied before the crackle of static signaled that he turned off our channel. All right. Preetius nodded as well as he talked to some pony on his own headset. I'll tell her for you. Stay safe down there. As he finished, he looked over to meet my expectant gaze and gave me a nervous smile. Sheep and his team are starting their run through the tunnels. Here's to hoping they can start to get some of the ponies in that area out. We trailed along the yellow line on the walk that faded, littering about the way was towards the ICU. The plan was for each of the assault teams to line up at one of the windows of the rooms and wait for the barrage to start. Then the other two teams of us were to get out into No Ponies Land and run for their designated cover. That made it sound easy, but we had to cross effectively 3.5 hoofball fields to even make it to our cover, which was the furthest rock of the bunch, but the closest to the enormous stadium door and the straightest shot from the hospital. We turned along a branching hallway as we slowed down to a walk. I wasn't the shortest of ponies around, but even I couldn't see over the heads of everyone who was in the hall. The sheer number of ponies waiting in the hall meant that we had to fold our group into a single file line just to press through. Stallions, mares, fillies, and colts. Each regular-looking pony seemed to glow with the fires of hope as we passed them. Hundreds were in this hall alone, waiting for us to get up and clear a path for them. Sure, our run was going to be hard, but our job was going to be a cakewalk compared to what these ponies were going to have to do. Another crackle came across my headset and into my ear. This thing working, y'all? Harmony's voice came across with a burst of static before it cleared. Gosh darn junk. Don't y'all ever maintain these things? Yes, we do. Gage's voice came over the radio as well. And they can hear you. Putting a hoof up to the talk switch again, I pressed it and spoke. Gage, are you on your way here? Yeah, she replied quickly. Grumpy's still charging, however. Going to be another 5 minutes at least before he'll be able to join the fight. Storm? Harmony's voice cut on as Gage finished. I'm doing what I can with getting finished here, but I'm also going to need some time. Pressing the button again, I met Preet's worried gaze with one of my own. How long? I I don't know. She stammered before she let out a long sigh. We only have the one car, so I gotta make sure it ain't gonna fail the first time around. Just do what you can, I said, looking around as we pressed on, past more and more hope-filled ponies. I believe in you, Harmony. You of all ponies can make this work. I know, Sugar Cube. Her voice seemed to pick up a bit from that. Stay safe now. Y'all hear me? She gave a sad chuckle and brought a small smirk to my muzzle. If y'all need me, I'm on channel 42. Will do. I responded before taking a hoof off the talk button. The quick hoof beats of a pony behind us made me look back. Between the close group of fighters on our side, I could briefly see Gage's nervous smile as she looked over at me. Good. We were all here. From up ahead, the crowd in front of us split and the door to another room on the back side of the hospital opened. From inside, Gallant poked his head out and trained on us as we moved towards him. We must hurry, he called out. The time of this ritual draws ever closer. At that, I looked at the clock on my pip vision and was dismayed at what I read. 11:51. Turning and pressing into the room, I was met with an odd sight. A ranger in power armor stood at the end of a makeshift ramp. The ramp ended at the window, and hastily welded to the frame were a few rings with chains hanging from them. The chains looped down and were mounted on various rings built into the power armor itself, sitting taut against the pony's pull as he stood there. If it had been any other day in the district, I would have easily confused him with a ranger who was being sold at auction. Team 3 is in position, the stallion muttered, most likely over his own radio. Turn on the EFS jammer. Only a moment passed before the markers in my vision flickered and went blank. Even though I was surrounded by green bars a moment ago, an empty compass was all that met my gaze. A crackle met my ear once again, before the annoyed voice of Cottage came over it. This is command. Prepare to initiate the artillery barrage. Even as he spoke, the rapid, thunderous booms picked up across the city. Unlike before, they didn't fire in bursts, rather in quick succession of each other. A steady pattern picked up between them as I could almost keep pace with the tapping of my hoof. However, before I could find that pace, the screaming shells started to fall on their marks. Go! The power-armored stallion's voice cut through the air before he lurched forward. The chains connecting to him went slack as he ran towards the window. With a crunch, he smashed through a window and threw himself into the open. The chains went taut, and the wall around the window frame gave way under the force of the armor that had imparted into it. The wall itself nearly came completely down, filling the room with dust and flakes of snow, as well as giving us and the others an easy exit. I love you, Storm, Shadow said as I kept my eyes locked on the rising dust of our exit. It pained me to know that he'd be up in the air supporting the other Pegasi, but they needed him. I had to trust that he knew what he was doing, just like I had when we were out after Iron with Hale. All right, Proteus called out, barely being heard over each and every artillery shell slumming down ahead of us. As he did, the stealth device in his magic gave a loud hum before the air between us shimmered. In an odd sight to see, every one of my friends disappeared into thin air. Looking down at myself as well, I found that I was no longer where I thought I was. I was disorientating, to say the least, but I'd just have to trust that we'd all stick together. Let's go, I shouted from nothing beside me, and I picked myself up straight off into a gallop. We burst over the broken wall and into the hoof-deep snow. The dust around me moved around as the others hid in it, revealing the forms of my friends as we pushed out into the open. The rhythmic blasts that dropped down around the arena met our eyes as we pushed through the other side. Bright flashes erupted around the arena, were accompanied with sprays of dirt and snow. Splashes of snow erupted around the field with each blast as the shrapnels skipped across it. From behind us, blasts of fire trailed over our heads. From above, numerous Pegasi fighters took wing, zipping past us forward and opening up on the Rangers who hadn't taken cover from the barrage yet. One of the artillery shells slammed down against the edge of the arena, blasting steel and concrete outward. With a heavy whoomp, the debris dropped down behind the defending rangers. I could see the lines they had built, the non-power armored ponies keeping themselves shielded from the majority of the blasts, sitting just along their makeshift walls. 100 meters out from the hospital, the machine guns that the undead had opened up. Tracers lit up the sky as they tried to keep the Pegasi from strafing their commands, but were still out in the open. Pain screams filled the air as several Pegasi were shot down. One of them screamed in fear, being cut short with a sickening slam into the dirt just ahead of us. Were it up to me, I would have turned around right there. I'd never been more afraid in my life, but the adrenaline had shut off my control. My legs, even though they wanted to give out, pushed me forward. My breath, though racing as much as my heart was, fueled me to move faster. Fighting in the streets of Baltimore had felt like war to me, but I was wrong. Fighting there was different. It was a two-way fight then, two sides on even ground pushing for the advantage. That was how life was in the wasteland, though. It had just been on a bigger scale is all. However, this was war. As we approached the crumbling corpse of the Pegasi, I looked to the snow around me. From where Previous had been in relation to me, the hoofsteps in the snow trailed around towards the left. Doing my best to keep up, I turned and continued to gallop. 200 meters out, and a rocket flew overhead. Explosions boomed around the sides of the various makeshift bunkers of our enemies. The crackling of anti-machine rifles from the hospital took up the silence between the impacts of the artillery. Just past the rock we were headed to, one of the shells impacted and sent half a power-armored ranger sailing through the air. Another, however, fell short and impacted 100 meters to our left. A harsh whimper met my ears, and a line of black started to trail next to me as I ran. Previous whined as he bled. I didn't know how bad he was hurt, but he didn't slow down. He knew we couldn't afford to. I just prayed to the goddesses that no more shells fell short from their mark, or even worse, that any of the rangers ahead noticed the line of blood steadily making its way through the snow. The rock was less than 100 meters away now, and the barrage felt to me like it was getting even heavier. Blast after blast whipped at us as we pushed on. Another blast fell short of its mark, but it wasn't near us. The bright flash brought more screams to our ears. I looked and found that two of the ponies in the squad across from us were no more than red smears in the snow now, and another was screaming as she bled heavily from where her rear legs used to be. The last two rangers in the team were visible again, and desperately galloping towards the rock. The rangers ahead put them all down quickly, however, the machine guns being turned on them in a display that put what Preed did to Cloud Streaker to shame. What made us worse was that I knew that Preed was forced to do that, but these rangers didn't feel anything for it. With one team revealed, we were all but found out now. Get towards... Preed started to say, but was cut off by another artillery round as it went off to the other side of the rock. I tried to keep my speed up as I watched the line of his blood turn. He was forcing us towards the right side of the rock. We're only a dozen meters from it when I realized what he was doing. The bunker that lay just in sight of our rock opened fire. A trail of rounds punched into the snow where we'd just been. Quickly, we put the large boulder between us and it. We were so close to the rock, just another few seconds and we'd make it. The invisibility field around us flickered and died. Almost immediately, we started taking fire from the rangers behind the walls. Hissing shots filled the air around us. The pattern of their rounds hitting the dirt around our hooves sent me into a panic. We'd been lucky to make it this far without a major injury, but with this many shots coming at us, our luck had run out. Gage let out a scream and tumbled in the snow as her blood splattered among it. My legs locked up and came to a stop. I began to turn around before a round slammed into the plate on my side and forced me to keep moving. With an arcane flash, Gallant teleported next to Gage. He stepped over her and flashed away again, appearing on the back side of the rock ahead. Keeping myself moving, I found that Ficha and I were the only two to have yet made it to the rock. The small concave back to that boulder provided some cover for the others in there, but it was going to be quite crowded once we got there. Then the whistling met my ears. I didn't even have time to react before Ficha threw himself into me. The round impacted just ahead of the rock on our side, and the blast picked me up off my hooves. My vision darkened for a moment as I tumbled through the snow, and my side erupted into a fiery pain as I rolled to a stop. My vision spun wildly, and the feeling of magic wrapping around me made me feel like I was falling. Unceremoniously, I was set down into the snow again as somebody shoved a glass bottle into my muzzle. "Storm, you have to stay with us." Preed's pained voice came in softly at first. I felt him tap at my side of my muzzle a few times. As the pain in my side was replaced with the odd feeling of a magical potion doing its job, I tried to focus on his voice. "Come on, don't pass out on us now." Choking, I spit out some of the potion as the bottle was taken from me. "I'm fine." That was definitely not the case at all, but so long as I wasn't dead, we had to keep moving. I felt Preed's hoof hook around my neck and pull me up. My vision took a moment to refocus, but when it did, I found myself staring at a red, white, and black smoking lump in the snow just to the side of the rock. Feature's body was twisted and contorted, nearly ripped to ribbons as it lay in the snow. Half of his face had been stripped down to the bone, and bits of metal shrapnel glinted from the inside of the bloody mess. He'd come back from his wounds before, but somehow I doubted that he'd be able to come back from something like this. "How?" I started to say, looking over to Preed. His illusion spell had been dropped, and the god ghoul stared at me with sad eyes. Along his side, an enormous gash bubbled as he breathed. The rotting and cut-up entrails that peeked through it sent my mind reeling back to the prison. I forced myself to shut my eyes before I threw up all over the snow. "I'm fine." The whine he emitted as he said that didn't give me any confidence that he was telling the truth. "Gage as well." He used his magic to forcefully turn my head away from him. As I opened my eyes again, Gage sat wide-eyed and panicked, pressing herself against the boulder. "We don't have that many healing potions to use, so try not to get hit by anything again." "So long as those assholes aren't shooting artillery at us," I grumbled, pulling myself up. As I did, I noticed the artillery had altogether stopped. Only the sounds of regular gunfire met our ears, and the radio in my ear crackled as Cottage's voice intruded on our lives yet again. "Forward teams, begin your diversions," he ordered coldly. "Smoke barrage will commence in 1 minute." "I don't know about you," Gage whined, "but I'm cool just sitting back here until the smoke arrives." And she looked at me with unfocused eyes, her whole body shaking as she did. The blood that still sat around the freshly healed bullet hole along her neck caught me off guard. She'd come so close to dying. If Gallant hadn't... There's no valor in being found in cowardice, no matter how justified that cowardice may be. Gallant spoke up as he drew his golden blade in his magic. "Fight to live. Fight and die. Either way, you know inside that you must fight all the same." With another flash, he teleported away. With a clink of glass, Prius pulled out another glowing blue bottle of sparkle cola that made my pit buck click wildly. Pouring it up to his lips, he guzzled the whole bottle down before pulling it out from his muzzle with a gasp. He used his hoof to wipe away the glowing drink from his lips before giving a shudder across his body. With a quick flash, his illusion spell returned, and the hole in his side knitted itself up. "Wow, that's the good stuff." Prius gave an enamored sigh, staring down at the bottle. On its side, I read it as Sparkle Cola Rad, something I'd only heard about from Harmony, but such a rare drink that I had never seen before. Hell, none of the scientists in my orchard even had it, and they were always drinking Sparkle Cola. I knew that it'd be worth saving for a special occasion. He twirled the combat pistols in his magic before tossing the bottle aside. His eyes glowed slightly behind their normal black, and a wide smile spread across his muzzle. His magic wrapped around my rifle and pulled it around to my hooves, setting it in them forcefully. "Ready to fuck some shit up, Storm?" "Well, we aren't dead yet," I grumbled, pulling my rifle closer. With how quickly Preacher recovered, remind me to never drink that shit if I ever find a bottle. "That's the spirit." he said, crouching down as he moved towards the edge of the rock. He poked his head out and swung his pistols around and started fighting. Pushing myself to move as well, I leaned my way around the other side of Gage and poked my head out, keeping my rifle lined up as I did. Through my optic, I found a combat helmet sitting just along the top of the wall next to the bunker, down a ways from us. Slowly, I let out my breath and pulled the trigger. My rifle fired and the helmet flipped into the air. The ranger under it was quick to turn their attention to me, but I tensed up and time slid to a stop. Stats informed me that I only had a 21% chance to hit her in the head, but I queued up 2 shots and let the spell resolve. My hoof moved the action, cycling the old shell out and loading in a new one. The rifle fired as the bolt closed, and the round sailed low and struck the dirt next to the mare. The spell moved my hoof, cycling the bolt again as the mare I was aiming at had pulled her own lever action in her hooves. Funny, that I've never seen anyone else use one in a fight in years other than me. The bolt on my gun locked shut again, and I pulled the trigger. The round let out a puff of powder from the receiver, but didn't go off. As Sats slid back to normal time, I threw myself back around the rock as the mare fired. Her shot skimmed across the snow and my hoof, but she might as well have missed by a mile. Shit, I muttered, pulling out my rifle. With a grunt, I shoved the lever forward. The cartridge inside flipped out, sizzling as it landed in the snow. Of course, the Rangers would keep their guns in working order, but not their ammo. Hey! Gage hissed as she levitated tasteless shotgun out. I'll have you know that we keep all our ammo stored in a dry and corrosion-free environment. As she talked, she shoved green shells into the feed port of the shotgun. Any defective ammunition we has and will always have been defected from the point of its manufacture. That's great to hear, I snorted, ramming the lever shut and reaching into my coat pocket. However, it still won't help me do shit out here if we have defective ammo. Hoofing out a few more rounds, I frowned as they were wet to the touch. Being tossed by that artillery shell must have shoved me some snow in there. Take it up with iron-shod firearms, complaint department. She glared at me before she scooted around the corner. With a quick peek around, she found a target to line up her shot with. Leaning out with her, I raised my rifle and found the same mare from before. She'd been waiting for me to pop back out and fired off a shot. I felt the impact against my shoulder, but the polymer plate absorbed the impact and shrugged it off for me. I was about to fire, but Gage fired her shot first. No longer protected by her missing helmet, the mare's head split in half from the shot. A few scattered shots forced Gage and I back behind the rock again. She pumped the hunting shotgun and cycled a new shell in, throwing the smoking green shell through the air to me. I caught it and looked at it. The blocky black letters that wrote out "Rifled Slug" were barely visible from its old age. No wonder it did so much damage to that mare. A heavy crack filled the air, and part of the rock next to us shattered into chunks. The heavy chatter of a machine gun opened up on us, and made Gage and I push ourselves even more towards the center of the rock. As we did, Prius folded himself back around the rock towards us as well. The three of us huddled there close together as a spray of rounds sparked off both sides of the rock, keeping us pinned there. Well, he barely shouted over the crunching of rock and whizzing of ricochets. I'd say that our distraction was a success. A heavy blast tore against the side of the rock as what felt like a rocket hit it. But a bit too much, it seems. Another rocket slammed against the rock, and I knew that I cursed the artillery already, but I started to wonder if those smoke rounds would ever come. As if sent by the goddesses themselves, the thundering of the guns on the horizon filled the air, and my heart with hope. The high-pitched whines of a familiar pair of Gauss rifles met my ears, and I looked up to find shadows of flare to stop overhead. A rocket whistled up to him, and I cringed as it only missed him by an inch. He dropped down and fired the Gauss rifles again, hovering just a moment before a few shots sparked off his black armor. One of the rounds sparked near his back and ricocheted up through the edge of his wing. My heart stopped as he gave out under its weight, and he fell. A small mercy came with the whistling artillery shells, finally arriving moments too late. They burst in the air all around us, quickly forming an obscuring line between us and Phileas's rangers. With a heavy slam, he cried out as he dropped to the ground. He screamed out as his bloody wing flopped to his side, writhing and pushing himself to get back to his hooves. A few more rounds sparked off of him as he got himself reoriented. One of Pallet's guns sparked and was torn apart as it was absorbed a few pot shots that Phileas's rangers gave off. With a grunt, he pushed himself towards us. He let out another agonizing scream as the heavy machine gun opened up through the expanding cloud, and one of the shots found its way into his flank. "Gage!" Proteus yelled out. Both his and her horns flared in light as they did their best to pull him close. Sparks shot off from their horns as Shadow pulled himself behind the rock with us, and into my waiting hooves where he collapsed into me. With a hiss, his helmet unsealed, and I all but ripped it off of him. "Hey." He looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, grimacing through the pain just to look at me. "Fancy meeting you." He was cut off when Proteus shoved another potion into the back, out of his back and into Shadow's muscle. Sucking it down greedily, his wounds started to knit themselves up, and I finally felt my heart beating wildly against my chest. Shadow winced as he tried to fold his wings in, and the one that had been injured hung out at the wrong angle. "You'll be fine for now, but I wouldn't try flying until a doctor can reset the healing wing," Proteus said as the smoke wafted around us. "I know." Shadow grumbled as he found the strength to sit up on his own again. "This isn't the first time I've had a broken wing." The radio in my ear crackled again. "All right, commence the assault," Cottage commanded. Without so much as a hesitant step, streams of ponies poured through the openings made in the walls from earlier. They didn't come with a rousing yell or any sort of noise. Only the thunderous sound of hundreds of galloping hooves met our ears as the mass filled the open land from between us and the hospital. With a sickening gasp, something moved from the snow by us behind the rock. Still coated in blood and open wounds, but no longer torn up as badly, Feacha torqued his head up and gave out a whine. That son of a bitch was still alive. Somehow. Proteus turned to me as another rocket hit the back of the rock. "Storm, I hate to say this, but I think it's time we open that gate." "Right." I nodded, hoofing at the radio that I had tucked into my coat. Hoofing at the dial, I changed the channel to 42 and pressed the talk button. "Hey, Harmony, how's that whole battering ram thing coming along?" Looking around at the glowing smoke cloud, the sounds of fighting picked up as our fighters reached the Deadite Rangers in placements. "Would be nice if we were ready." "I know, I'm working as fast as I can," she grumbled back. "Calm yourself. I'm just needing to adjust my straps before getting her in position." Straps?" I asked, looking over to Gage, who simply shrugged. "You aren't going to stay inside the Marauder, are you?" I knew that she was distressed over her mother, but that was not something I'd let her do. Sitting, I waited for a response. A few seconds went by that felt like they dragged on longer and longer. With another crackle, she came back over the radio. "Y'all remember back when y'all were 8? She spoke with a chuckle. Again, now really wasn't the time for jokes or fond memories. I found that newspaper out of the striped jetpack that crashed in Panamera while I was full sitting ya. And remember how Skyline had that old wrecked one stored in my father's shop?" "Oh, are you kidding me?" I snapped. "You are not pulling another Panamera again. You don't even have a jetpack this time. And you doubt that I can't make it work?" She huffed over the radio. "Trust me, Storm. I got this." With a sharp squelch, her radio cut out. "Harmony," I said again, waiting for a response. Moving on the talk button even harder, I asked again. "Are you there? Harmony?" Goddesses, this is not what I wanted her to do. "Storm, what the fuck is she talking about?" Gage spoke as she put her hoof to my shoulder. Back when we were young and dumb, she tried to fix up an old zebra jetpack she found in the garage. Strapped the damn thing to her back without testing it to see if it'd even work. I face-hoofed, slumping down before Shadow pulled me in close. Looking up at him, I at least had a bit of hope. Shadow, can you catch her? He frowned at that. I don't think I can. Shaking his head, he winced as he tried to open his busted wing all up. Sorry. Well, if he couldn't, it's not like I was out of options. Looking down at the radio, I hoofed it again quickly, changing the channel to 28. I pressed down to the talk button and crossed my hooves that he was still alive. Stormed oil can. You still in the skies? Looking up through the smoke, I couldn't see shit. And that was the problem with this whole plan. Smoke works both ways. Yeah, I'm here. He called back, sounding out of breath. Hanging out above you and following something big. The way he said that didn't exactly make me feel any better about anything. It's headed towards your rock. A scream beat out the fighting ahead of us, and through the smoke a dark object flew through the air. The top half of a blue-coated mare tumbled to a stop through the snow, her body having been ripped straight in half by something. All of us turned towards where the mare had come from and leveled our guns at it. You need something, Storm? Oil Can's voice crackled over my helmet. Yeah, give me a minute, I said before letting go of the talk button. The swirling smoke shifted as something big approached. A soft blue glow grew as whatever it was came closer, step by step. My mind tried to tell me something, but I wasn't trying to listen. I should have. I knew what was coming. The bulky midnight blue power armor that Elder Chili Pepper had worn on the assault on Dodge had been reinforced. The brightly glowing blue eye that had been stolen from Iron Will pierced the darkness as it stared directly at me. We stopped walking forward, standing imposingly before a pair of steam jets emanated from his face mask like Iron Will used to. The bastard must have salvaged the rest of his parts and put it into Chili Pepper's armor. What the fuck is that thing? Gage gasped. I've never seen Ranger armor like that. Remember when I told you that you couldn't repurpose parts of Iron Will? I said, checking my pip vision to make sure I was ready before casting a quick glance at her. When she nodded, I sighed and tightened my grip around the rifle. Well, he didn't listen. There was a long hiss that came from the Elder's armor, and I hadn't heard it in quite some time, but I still remember what came next. Every pony move! Prettius shouted. Chili Pepper leapt forward at an amazing speed. The four of us barely had time to dive out of the way before Chili Pepper galloped and slammed against the boulder. A horrendous snap emanated when he struck it, sounding like the hotel had before coming down. Rolling over to get to my hooves, I looked up to find that Chili Pepper had, in fact, hit the boulder so hard that it had cracked right down the middle. With more speed than I could have thought, he pushed himself back and spun around. To keep my speed up, I dropped my rifle and pushed my legs to hop back from where I'd been. The sharpened tips of the horns attached to his helmet sliced the air just in front of me. I didn't have time to think. Putting my hoofs to the ground, I did my best to dodge his swings. Even though Preet had been slow to get up, Chili Pepper didn't deviate from attacking me. I should have been glad he wasn't going after my friends, but I couldn't help but feel like this was a bit of an unfair fight. Hold on, Storm! Shadow called out, lining up his battle saddle. With a high-pitched whine, Shadow fired at his one working gas rifle. A pair of shots struck Chili Pepper's reinforced armor and simply sparked off. Shit, was all I could hear him say. Find something bigger! I snapped. Chili Pepper led off to the right, so I dodged left. What I didn't see coming was him spin-kicking me out from one of his rear legs and nailing me to the side. It felt like a sky cart hit me, and I was tossed a few feet through the air, slamming into the snow. I did my best to roll with the hit and get back to my hooves. Ask, and you shall receive. A voice a few flaps above me made me look up. Oil can, zipped down, holding something in his hooves. Previous owner isn't using it anymore. Letting it go above me, I found an anti-material rifle drop straight into my waiting hooves. Thanks. Now get out of here, I called out, struggling to pull the heavy rifle up my hooves. It was extremely unwieldy, with the entire back end of the rifle having to be pinned against my side to even be steady enough to aim it with my hooves. It wasn't meant to be hoof-fired, but at this range I didn't care. Ahead, through the smoke, the blue light grew closer. Struggling to keep myself steady, I waited until I could see the bright eye of his mask clearly. As he came closer, I smirked and simply pressed the trigger. The gun flashed as it roared. The muzzle blast was so powerful that it even whipped away some of the smoke from in front of me. A bright yellow trail of sparks lit up the night as the large caliber round hit the edge of Chili Pepper's helmet and whistled away into the night. My smirk died as I found the progress unimpeded, and I tried to drop the gun. Instead, he reached his forehoof up and grabbed the barrel. Iron Will's hands had been wired up to the end of his forelegs, and the mechanical fingers crushed the barrel with their strength. Without any effort from his part, he twisted the gun and used it as a lever to throw me into the air. Slamming and tumbling through the snow yet again really wasn't getting any funner the more times that it happened. What was nice, however, was that I'd rolled right next to Pretius. Let me guess. Pretius remarked as he helped me to my hooves. You need something bigger. Again, the blue light from Chili Pepper's armor appeared through the smoke. And if that weren't bad enough, the smoke itself was dissipating quickly. Hate to tell you, but there's not a bigger gun to hit him with. A roar of Arcanotech engine from behind us met our ears. Both Pretius and I turned around to see a single light growing brighter. With a whine, the two of us galloped out of the way of Harmony's topless, speeding armored car. Yeehaw! She yelled as she plowed into Chili Pepper, dragging him and his armor through the smoke towards the door. Both Preet and I looked at each other before we realized that we needed to move. The two of us ran for the boulder again, as I could hear the hissing of rockets coming from up ahead. We dove behind the boulder, joining Gage and Shadow, who were already there, along with the mostly intact but still unconscious Feacha. Oil! You have to catch Harmony! Like a missile, he shot across the sky. Turning, he aimed ahead to where she'd be and zipped down under her. With what looked like the softest of grasps, he grabbed onto her and flew her towards us. The harness that she wore had 4 burnt-out rockets on it, and it smoked almost as much as she did, as Oil carefully set her onto the ground. Oh, goddesses! He spoke out as she hung limply in his hooves. She was in terrible shape. Half of her looked to have gotten caught up in the blast, looking as charred black as Pallet had back in Dodge. Almost alarming was that her right foreleg and right hind leg both ended in pulpy masses of bloody bone and mutated muscle. Like with Shadow and I before, Pretty shoved a potion into her muzzle and forced it down her throat. With a sputtering cough that brought up more blood than potion, Harmony stirred awake. Did you catch me? She said, looking up at Oil with a weak smile. When he nodded, she shifted her shredded leg and looked at it before flopping back to a whine. Mom always said I took more after Dad. She sighed, closing her eyes and going limp again. No. Oil Can whimpered. You can't leave me. I was going to ask you out. I was going to finally tell you how I felt for all these years. Oil, the same stallion who'd fearlessly led the charge at the hotel, who'd fought on this whole time, broke down into heavy sobs. She's not dead yet, Pretty snapped, and she won't be so long as you get her back to the doctors inside. Snapping his hoof out, he pointed back towards the hospital. Go! Oil Can sniffled and grabbed her tightly again. With a firm nod, he flapped hard and took off. I prayed to the goddesses that Harmony would make it. Too many have died tonight, and I wasn't going to spend too long digging the graves for them. I didn't have any more time in my life for another grave. Is that how it worked the first time? Gage spoke up. When I looked back at her in confusion, she scrunched her muzzle. It didn't really work the first time. It just had enough thrust to get her into the air and not down from it. Pallet had to catch her, and she almost didn't. I grumbled. I keep telling her, Earth ponies can't fly. She kept trying to prove me wrong on that. I sighed. One of these days she's going to get herself killed, and it'd be me telling her brother that his whole family is dead. Finally, Gage groaned out. Come on, we've got work to do. Yes, Miss Gage? Grumpy's voice came from behind, pulling my attention to it as it floated by. Good evening, Miss Storm. He spoke in his annoyingly cheerful way as he all but floated by after Gage. Looking at the clock in my pip buck, I realized this had taken way too much time as it was. 11:56. Come on. Shadow spoke up from behind me. With a smile, he held out his hoof. I took it and walked with him around the rock. Prettius trotted up alongside us as we pushed ourselves into a gallop. Harmony's battering ram had worked. The improvised explosives had done one hell of a number on the reinforced stadium entrance. Twisted bits of steel reinforcement jutted out from the crumbling and still growing concrete. As we entered, more resistant fighters followed with us. The sound of fighting behind us picked up again, but that wasn't something that we could really care about right now. Our job had been to get inside the arena and stop Villius. We now trotted through a long concrete hall that stretched down the entrance to the old hoofball arena's field. We'd caught up to Gage and Grumpy quite quickly, heading towards a shoddy wooden gate constructed as part of a slave fighting that had gone on here. With each gallop, my heart raced. Were the thousands of ponies in here still alive? What would we find on their side? We were so close to finishing this fight for good. The small gemstone that still sat in my pocket pulsed in time with my heart, and the flames of hope from those around me grew even stronger. Move aside! Grumpy called, pushing his way past us. The talisman under him glowed as bright as it had before. With a slam that splintered the gate, Grumpy powered right through it and almost pulled most of the gate straight off its hinges. Then Grumpy disappeared into the thin air. Pushing myself faster, I galloped ahead to the others. That had been a mistake when I reached the end of the tunnel, and I had to skid to a stop. I'd forgotten that Cheap had said that the arena had been dug out, and a 10-foot drop sat almost right at the end here. Inside of it sat Grumpy, with all three of his eye stalks staring up at me. Excuse me? He spoke up at me. Would you care to point me in the direction of the ponies who are responsible for this? He extended one of his arms, pointing out to the center of the arena. The excavation had been far more than just 10 feet. The digging had stepped down, dropping down 10 or so feet and running another 20 before repeating. 5 or so steps culminated in the off-colored onion-shaped bulb of Phileas' tower. At the lowest levels, huddled and chained together, were what were left of the still-living ponies of Baltimore. With a flash, Gallant appeared next to me. He looked more ragged than ever. His previous gold armor was coated in scratches, bullet holes, and covered in gore. However, he himself seemed fine. We're cutting this far too close, he uttered to me. We have little time left. I know, I said, looking back as the others finally caught up. Get us down there. He nodded, and like he'd done before in the orchard, he'd wrapped us all in his magic. With an arcane snap, we appeared down in the lowest pit. The ponies who had been chained up there let out frantic whines and gasps as we appeared, calming down when we didn't immediately move towards them. Storm? A meek and raspy voice in the crowd pulled my attention. I looked over, searching for who'd spoken. As I did, the chained crowd parted as much as they could, revealing a pair of familiar-looking, highly emaciated ponies. Mom! I gasped, breaking off from the group and galloping over to her. As I pressed against her, the gem in my chest flared with energy. I could feel it inside of me, welling up as it had in the chamber with the tree. Storm, you're on fire. My dad rasped out as well. The whole crowd gasped as I pulled myself away from Mom's grasp. What's happening to you? I know who I am, I replied, staring at them as they looked up at me in fear. I know that you found me in that facility in Chasm. I know that I wasn't born your filly, rather made in a lab. I smiled as their fear died inside them, smoldering by their own growing light of hope. I may not have been your little filly, but you two are the parents that I love, and I'm here to save you all. I know this, because that's the pony I was always supposed to be. The fire inside me burst from my hooves, trailing up to my legs as it had before, and forming the flickering armor around me. I'm going to destroy Phileas and bring back hope to every pony in the wasteland. Not if we don't hurry, Gallant called out from behind me. I watched as he climbed through one of the tower windows and disappeared into the darkness inside. The others with me followed, and only Pretty stood waiting for me at the window. Go. Mom spoke softly. Be the mare you were always meant to be. I will. I love you both, I said, turning and galloping towards the tower. It was finally time to face Phileas. Chapter end. The great unknown surrounds me, but I am not alone. Quest finished. Into the belly of the beast. Quest started. Exodus.